And what's the trick with this? I fixed it because I put it up there, so it works just fine.
I'm George from GWP. We work together there for your lab.
Hi, good to see you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Happy to have you here with us.
Yeah. They have so many things happening at the same time. But
Yeah, I know.
great to see you.
Oh, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Really excited.
Yeah.
Ariana? Is it okay if I put these?
There is perfect.
Can I place them under here just for until you come up? Is that okay?
Of course.
Yeah.
And these we use also while we're talking.
Yes. No.
Just when we're on the camera.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Is this on? Okay. Can everyone hear me? And if you want to hear me better, you can put on the headphones. Oh. No, shoot. Okay. Testing. Welcome. There is a question about which channel to turn to, and 8. Please turn to channel 8. No, channel 8 is not working. Oh, please turn to channel 8 and make sure your volume is turned quite high. Hello. Magical switch of the microphone. Just exactly the chaos that we want to kick off week 2. So, I will take everyone to attention, please. My name is Leslie Porres. I'm the head of policy for finance at WaterAid. It's my pleasure to invite you to an amazing moment for us all together today. We will be launching the Principles for Just Water Partnerships. I think many of you in the room and online, hello to the live stream, have been engaged with this process with us over the past year. But for those of you who haven't, this is a great opportunity to learn more and get involved now. But with little ado, I would like to hand over to a colleague for some welcoming remarks. The Honourable Carleen Maywald, South Australian Water Ambassador, is dedicated to the sustainable water management and climate challenges and improving access to water for all. Carleen has served as Minister of Water Security in the South Australian government during the Millennium Drought, the worst drought in recorded history. She is most noted for her significant contribution to progressing national reforms to the intergovernmental management of the Murray-Darling Basin in Australia and setting the direction for the long-term water security of Australia. She has also served as chair of Australia's National Water Commission and as director of one of Australia's major water utilities. She is currently serving as chair of WaterAid Australia and trustee of WaterAid International. Carleen, we are so pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you, Leslie. It is such a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this really tremendous progress report. I am absolutely delighted to be here at the launch of the Principles for Just Water Partnerships. It's the outcome of a truly global consultation that started in earnest just after the Financing Development 4, where the need to consider development finance was deployed as front and centre. Standing before you at COP30 in the Amazon, we cannot ignore the reality that climate change is water change, and the cost of failing to address what is underway from a mitigation perspective will only grow if we don't take action now. But the reality is climate change is already here. In the water industry, we all understand that over 80% of the impacts of climate change will manifest through water, whether it's floods, droughts, raging bushfires or unpredictable catastrophic storms. We must do water better. If we don't take action in a collective way, we will not be able to do this. The principles here represent an important first milestone in a longer journey, which began in 2023 when the Global Commission on the Economics of Water made waves with its first report that highlighted how traditional economics have failed water and a new approach needed to be undertaken. The Commission called for Just Water Partnerships, a national-level collaboration body that included all relevant stakeholders and considered water investments not solely on economic returns, but with an eye to both people and planet, a justice and social equity lens. When people are excluded from decision-making for too long, things boil over, and we are seeing that right here and now. This focus on people aligns with WaterAid's priority on reaching the most marginalised and vulnerable. So we were quick to jump into the action and see how we could bring Just Water Partnerships into being. For example, WaterAid in Australia, we're partnering with Indigenous groups to improve partnerships for better water outcomes, particularly in the vulnerable communities in outback Australia. Early consultation on the Just Water Partnerships with water peers in 2024 illuminated the need to start with a definition and underlying principles. And today we officially mark the achievement of reaching that first milestone. But WaterAid did not do this alone. First and foremost, we worked hand in hand with the International Water Management Institute, or IMI, because Just Water Partners embrace all sides of water. Water and sanitation, health and hygiene, where WaterAid has been active for over 40 years, and also water resource management, where IMI has been conducting research and innovation for essentially the same amount of time. But WaterAid and IMI are only the facilitators of the process. The principles that we are launching come from 3 rounds of global consultation alongside several national level consultations and reflect a large variety of stakeholder groups: governments, academia, corporate sector, financial actors, academia and civil society. These are all principles for the water secure we want. Once again, I'm so pleased to be welcoming you to the launch of these principles, where we'll discuss, and where today we'll also discuss exactly what we said must be done and included, and then strategise for the next steps in bringing Just Water Partnerships to life. This launch is only the beginning, and I hope that next year at COP31, I will be welcoming you to the next phase of activating Just Water Partnerships as the true host in Australia. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Of course, if we are successful in Australia, it will be in the city of Adelaide, which is near where I live, in the great state of South Australia, where we have a great story to tell. We're currently on our way to achieving 100% renewable energy by 2027. We're currently sitting at just around 80%, and we're well ahead of the Australian targets and many world targets. We've got an equally extraordinary water story to tell, though, as the driest state in the driest inhabited continent on Earth. How we have delivered water security in the face of extreme variability is a story worth sharing. Hopefully I'll see you all in Adelaide, and with that I look forward to learning more from our panellists regarding our principles for Just Water Partnerships. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carleen. I think that was a really beautiful framing to set us going. And as I was saying, with Carlene, she highlighted the role that we have been taking forward from an idea that was catalyzed by the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. We have, for our keynote, the pleasure of inviting one of the originators of that idea and one of the co-chairs of the commission to share her thoughts with you. So with that, Dr. Mariana Mazzucato is Professor of Economics of Innovation and Public Value at University College London, where she is founding director of the UCL Institute of Innovation and Public Purpose. She is winner of international prizes, including the Grand Officiant Ordine as Merito della Repubblica Italiana in 2021, which is Italy's highest civilian honor, the 2020 John Van Neumann Award, the 2019 All-European Academies Madame de Staël Prize for Cultural Values, and the 2028 Leontief Prize for Advancing the Frontiers of Economic Thought. She's a member of the UK Academy of Social Sciences and the Italian Academy of Sciences Lindsay. In 2025, she was appointed Commander of the British Empire for services to economics in the King's Birthday Honours List. Pope Francis appointed her to the Pontifical Academy for Life for bringing more humanity to the world. Professor Mariana Mazzucato is, as I said, one of the 4 chairs of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, whose 2023 and 2024 reports proposed Just Water Partnerships as a mechanism to address water financing and get blended finance right. With that, I'm really pleased to have you here, Mariana.
Thank you, Leslie, and thanks everyone for coming. So, are any of you in a relationship? You know that sometimes partnerships are not good ones. They even end in divorce. So the best thing we can do is to make sure this word does not get hijacked, captured to mean something neutral. And that's why it's important for the word just to be really unpacked in what we mean. I do think that the whole notion of partnership should be always associated with an ecosystem. And as you know, biologists are quite rigorous. I don't know if this with that word, whereas economists, again, are quite lazy. We talk about things like innovation ecosystems and forget to define, as a biologist would, whether that ecosystem is parasitic, if it's predator-prey, if it's symbiotic, or if it's mutualistic. So what we want are symbiotic, mutualistic ecosystems. I used to say reciprocity until Trump took the word for his tariffs. So we want reciprocal relationships, mutualistic ones. And for the council, what we try to do is to make sure that we go beyond the obvious. The obvious should be, but it's not, hence it's important to say it, that the cost of inaction is greater than the cost of action. By the way, it's true with everything. Of course, it's true with climate change. That was the big point of Nick Stern's report. But it's also true, just think of everyday life in your cities. The cost of imprisoning a young teenager is much higher than investing in that teenager. Youth centers, public libraries, after-school clubs. It literally costs more in the criminal justice system. Do we do that? No. Do we need more studies, fancy econometric equations to prove it? No. We just don't care. And I hate to put it that way, but if we care about stuff, we treat it much, much more seriously. And isn't it sad that when we care about war, which of course we always care about, no one has a 2030 agenda for winning a war, they want to do it now, they create money out of thin air. Whereas for everything else, whether it's climate or health, we pretend there's no money, and then it's all a divide and conquer. A bit more in health, less education, and so on. So creating finance is of course important, but how we also create it, the structure of the finance, the structure of the partnerships, the structure of public actors, the structure of corporate actors matters. So the how matters as much as the what. And I can tell you, as someone who lives in a country where Thames Water is one of our companies, which has basically siphoned out all the money to shareholders and dividend payouts and not reinvested those profits back into the water infrastructure. So we literally have sewage in our rivers. Let's go beyond talking about partnerships and also talk about corporate governance at the center of those partnerships. But anyway, the facts and figures, you know, over 1,000 kids die every day under the age of 5 due to unsafe water. What we did in the Global Commission was we not only had 4 wonderful co-chairs, including the head of the WTO and Ghazi, the president of Singapore, Johan Rockstrom, who's literally next door, and myself, but we had wonderful commissioners, including lots of mayors, like the mayor of Freetown, Yvonne Sawyer, who with us also just began by saying, again, it's not just the cost of inaction, it's how do we act? What does it actually mean to pay attention to the collective nature of that action? Again, hence the symbiotic partnerships point, but also to make sure that we bring a new economic thinking, because the old economic thinking has been part of the problem. So what I want to do in the time I have is to talk about 2 fundamental pillars of that new economic thinking. One is this common good approach, which I've been writing about for some years, and I have a new book out on it in the spring, on the economics of the common good, because we need to go beyond the public good, and I'll try to convince you about that. But also this idea of outcomes and mission orientation. But we began the work by actually proving scientifically through different scientists who were also in the commission led by Johan Rockstrom, that it's not just that we say we need collective action. We literally need collective action because of the science. So we're in the Amazon now. It's been proven that deforestation in one part of the world, like in Brazil, actually causes droughts and floods in another part of the world. So even if we wanted to be opportunistic and individualistic and nationalistic, which we shouldn't be, even if we thought that was the right way to act, it's the wrong way even from an opportunistic point of view. We need collective action. Otherwise, just like with COVID, we saw that when some people in the world don't have access due to inequity to all the health remedies, including vaccines, then we are all worse off. And so the fact that countries and communities are interdependent, the fact that climate, biodiversity, and water are interconnected. So these 3 COPs are a bit of a problem, by the way, because they're all connected, these themes. What does it mean to have conferences on each one of these things? The fact that water cuts across all the sustainable development goals and all sectors. There's not one sector, right, that doesn't include water, including AI and all these data centers, which are currently siphoning so much water out of the system, to the point that even in a global north country like the UK, social housing programs are being stopped because we cannot deliver water to people because water is getting siphoned out to cool data centers. The latest example was in Oxford. Again, a very rich part of the UK this is happening, let alone in the more vulnerable parts of the world. But one of our, again, commissioners who I already mentioned, Yvonne Sawyer, she also always reminded us that when you don't have access to water, that affects gender parity. Again, one of the most, well, all the SDGs are important. A lot of women get raped when they go fetch water. So whether it's gender parity, life below the oceans, climate change, of course, SDG 6, all the SDGs are actually related to water. So having this collective approach, we thought, really requires a new economics of the common good. And us 4 co-chairs, what we did was we each brought a bit of our specialties. So Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who used to be the Minister of Finance for Singapore, brought a lot of thinking about finance. And Ghazi, trade. Johan, his scientific work. My role, and I'm just giving you a bit of background here, was to bring a common good economics approach and a mission-oriented approach, which is what I'll talk about. And the common good, let me just say, it's not supposed to replace this notion of the public good. It's just to say the public good, for those of you who've done any economics, you'll know it's a correction. It's a correction for something the private sector doesn't do. So when you have non-excludable, non-rival characteristics, we expect the public sector to fill the gap. So this idea of filling the gap is why we end up with big numbers like 7 trillion of the SDGs as a financial gap. But you can already see where I'm going. It's a negative mindset. It's one side fixing another, one side de-risking the other, one side facilitating the other, and in corrective filling the gap mode. So the common good is supposed to be about saying, let's have objectives, and I'll talk about the water objectives, where the how we relate to each other, capital and labor, public and private, science and industry, citizens, especially in places where there's so much injustice, and the state, the how we relate to each other matters as much as what we are actually trying to achieve. And so you'll see how this ended up being quite important for the work, because we talked about outcomes orientation, but who decides what those outcomes are? How can they participate as real stakeholders? How can we share the knowledge? How can we share the rewards? Just Water partnerships cannot be a continued socialization of risk and privatization of rewards. And how can we make sure we have complete transparency and accountability along the way? So that first point about outcomes and mission orientation, what we did was use this approach to missions, which I had personally had experience with in the European Commission, where the idea is, let's not think of water as a sector. Let's think of it as a series of problems that require many different sectors to innovate, to invest, to train, and use every single instrument that a government has, like procurement, public loans, and subsidies, to foster bottom-up experimentation towards mission accomplished. And it was actually through the work in Europe that now this missions instrument actually exists. Unfortunately, it's not enough in terms of the amounts of money that is created, but this idea of starting with a challenge, turning it into a mission, cross-sectoral and bottom-up experimentation, and the need for governments to not think of, again, water as a sector or climate as a ministry, but actually to always have a cross-ministerial approach to these really, really important challenges. And the 5 critical mission areas that we talked about in the commission were to launch a new revolution in food systems, restoring natural habitats precisely because of that link between biodiversity and water, where as we deforest, then we have less of a sponge. So we end up going from droughts to floods and avalanches. I experienced this in Sicily over the summer, where we had a drought and it finally rained and it all just came down and caused massive damage. And we know that's, again, always even worse in vulnerable countries. Establishing a circular water economy, using AI for good instead of AI for bad, and ensuring no child die from unsafe water by 2030. So for each of these, think of these as challenge areas around water, and then turning them into a mission using that approach I mentioned, which is starting with, for example, that first one on a revolution in food systems, being very clear what the mission is. Otherwise, it's open to a lot of bullshit, don't mind my French, like blah, blah, blah. You know, have you actually gone to the moon and back in a short amount of time, right? Instead of just saying the space race. Similar with any societal related mission, turning it into something we can actually say yes or no, and making sure that we get the food system, digital, transport, materials, all part of that transformation. And so coming to this idea also of Just Water partnerships, what was so interesting is that when we've worked with specific countries, because as I was just saying to Leslie, the commission is not disbanded, we're now in implementation phase. We've been working with Barbados, for example, making sure that the water-related missions like this one, I unfortunately can't see from here, but anyway, around food and water security is actually driven by principles of justice and equity. And these were designed by the Barbadian government itself, which included worker, God, I cannot see this, making sure that workers had dignity, making sure that people, especially in a country that's experienced slavery for so many years, are part of that process and themselves feel valued as we actually have mission accomplished. And so the idea of Just Water partnerships beyond the missions, right? So these were the mission areas, but then the how, that matters as much as the what, we went on to talk about the Just Water partnerships in terms of a critical principle through which we actually achieve the missions, which means we need to unpick all the contracts. You know, water rights are crazy. It's given by the state to companies, and yet 80% of industrial wastewater is not recycled. Why? It should be in the contract. You should not have access to any water to make beer or Pepsi-Cola if you don't agree to recycle the industrial wastewater. So really looking at contracts for real, shaping finance so we don't just talk about financial gaps, harnessing data as a foundation for action, but data for good, not just using everyone's data to sell it off to make a lot of money, and building global water governance into all those systems. So again, what does this mean in terms of the JWPs? And how do we make sure they're not just part of the problem? I had already begun working on this with Raj Shah, the head of the Rockefeller Foundation, back in 2022 as part of a WEF council, where we talked about let's go beyond, again, the blah blah of partnerships, and we came up with all sorts of different ideas of how to do that, embedding it, again, in the contracts. And more recently with Danny Roderick, we looked at examples around the world on different types of contracts, including, for example, the CHIPS Act in the US, where in the contract was the agreement that the companies, semiconductor companies accessing public money would have to agree to be good companies, right? Limit your share buybacks. If you're going to make money on the back of a water right, reinvest that money back into the infrastructure, and not that Thames Water example I gave you in the beginning. And so this idea that we actually need conditionality, reciprocity, symbiosis in terms of who has access to the goods, how to direct profits back in, profit sharing, and so on, was very important. In fact, already in that paper, we looked at the need to improve water and land conservation and the efficiency of water use in all the contracts, directing investment back in, reinvesting profits in productive business activities such as R&D around water, and water basin conservation programs. And so designing these Just Water partnerships, we then asked ourselves in the report, which hopefully you all have one of these. If you don't, raise your hand and my team will give you one. The idea of considering how the missions and the outcomes and the targets themselves, how they need to also embody that co-creation, how people on the ground who are experiencing this inequity, so injustice around water, should help design them. Aligning multilateral and national development banks and governments around the partnerships. There's over 22 trillion in national banks like BNDES in Brazil, KfW in Germany. How can they themselves embody that justice element? An example in Germany is the only reason there's green steel is the bank, the local national bank, put it as a requirement for that sector to get any support from government. They had to agree to lower the material content of production, which they did through repurpose, reuse, recycle, across the whole innovation chain. And so what does it mean to kind of provide that directionality without micromanaging? If you tell everyone what to do around water, we're going to impede entrepreneurship and innovation, but you need to be clear what the goals are, clear what the direction is, and make sure that every subsidy, every water right, every procurement contract, don't forget the huge amounts of money that governments spend on the demand side, just buying stuff like school meals, should embody within them this idea of justice and conditionality to make sure those partnerships are truly outcomes oriented. And shifting away also from a project-based approach to a more portfolio approach, precisely so we don't get all these cute little projects, but actually that transformation where the sum is bigger than the parts. And that's again where this notion of the common good became useful, to make sure that there was clear directionality, co-creation and participation, collective learning and knowledge governance, access for all and reward sharing, and transparency and accountability. This was a paper I wrote back in 2023 that we used in the commission to kind of unpick the principles. And this is why it was so encouraging to see in the report that's coming out today, is it? It's being launched today. That idea of putting those partnerships in the middle and asking everything what I just said, what does it then mean for the specific ways in which government action is had? Financing bodies like whether it's public banks or other types of funds like the Amazon Fund, the TFFF, what does it mean to embed within those new forms of partnerships, making sure the private sector, I think you can even be bolder in your report, is rethinking its corporate governance so that stakeholder value and not shareholder value is the way they're governed, but not as an ex post afterthought in the way they work together. By the way, renewable energy companies currently are one of the worst for tax evasion. So let's not think that just because someone's doing water or renewable energy, they're good companies. How they actually work with tax systems, how they work with national labor unions, right? That's why we have the weekend. Trade unions fought for it. None of us would have Saturdays and Sundays without people dying for it. So what does it mean to work in a just way with trade unions and so on? Anyway, I will stop here because I think you guys did an excellent report that really brought a lot of these ideas together. And I think the most important thing is don't let the slogans get captured through the kind of greenwashing and water washing. Let's use this report, which is very important, to be a thorn in the side of all those who use words like ecosystems in lazy ways. Let's have reciprocal, mutualistic, symbiotic ecosystems, and let's make sure that at places like COP, we not only talk about it, but then go off into countries and test it out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mariana. It was really fantastic to hear, to see, and to see all of these things coming together. And it's really great that we actually have Mariana's perspective on it. But one of the things that we were talking about, and what I get to then invite us to the stage to really cover and look at, is again, how does this happen at the country level? And at this point, Let me move us forward. Okay. Some countries across the WaterAid and EME networks have really been excited about and taking up this idea of just water partnerships and what does it mean and how can we do this differently? How can we achieve many of the ideas that you were sharing? And one country that's really jumped to the forefront with this is the country of Ghana. And Ghana conducted, in addition to the consultation process that Mariana Diaz-Simpson will be sharing with you shortly, Ghana itself conducted its own national level consultation to feed into and contribute to the report. Then, afterwards, in fact, basically 2 weeks ago, they convened and right at the end of October, they convened their own national consultation, again, having had a sneak peek at the principles that you all see again quite soon, and start the conversation. What does this mean for us in Ghana? How do we take these principles and apply them? How do we translate them, right? And with that, it's such a pleasure to have the Honorable Issoufou Sidou, the State Minister for Climate Change and Sustainability for the government of Ghana, also here to share his reflections with you. So please, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. And good morning. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for this opportunity to join you for this global launch of the Principles for Just Water Partnerships. As I noted during Ghana's stakeholder meeting, water is not just a resource. It is a common good essential for development, climate resilience, and fairness. This is why Ghana engaged actively in the consultation and held both a national dialogue and a follow-up stakeholder consultations before this COP30 to consider the principles for just water partnerships. The national engagement revealed 3 actions. First, Ghana needs a unified platform that brings together water resource management, WASH, agriculture, energy, finance, civil society, and the private sector. Fragmentation limits our progress, and just water partnerships offer a structure needed for stronger alignment with our climate and development priorities. Second, climate justice must remain at the center of our work. Many rural and climate vulnerable communities face water stress and rising costs. A Just Water Partnership for Ghana intends to promote affordable services, protect those most at risk, and ensure that no one is left behind. Third, we need to predictably and blended financing. Water is central to adaptation and economic stability, yet remains underfunded. Establishing a Just Water Partnership will require stronger investment planning, better data, and financing models that unite public, private, and concessional capital. Ladies and gentlemen, the Just Water Partnership principles are not just to be achieved, but they are to ensure that we achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 6, which aims to ensure that everyone has access to safe and affordable water, sanitation, and hygiene by 2030. It seems to me that in many of our discussions, we intend to presume that targets set under the SDGs are far away from us. But we have just 5 years left to achieve them. It is for these reasons that I employ stakeholders in the watch space to begin to critically consider the Just Water Partnership principles and investments for same beyond COP30. In the context of this, Ghana will focus on 3 thematic areas: develop a clear national roadmap for the Just Water Partnership, seek technical support to ensure coordination and develop bankable projects, as well as strengthen collaboration with financing stakeholders who recognize the need for Just Water Partnership as a credible climate adaptation mechanism for water security. Today's lunch moves us from principles to practice. For Ghana, it is an opportunity to align our water and climate ambitions in a very fair and sustainable way. I reaffirm the commitment to advancing these principles with my office and with my colleagues, ministers, development partners, and the private sector, and we look forward to continuing this conversation beyond COP30. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. We have been really, it's a great pleasure to have you with us and continuing this conversation. We are very excited to continue the work with the team in Ghana and see what can really be built, especially with an eye towards the UN Water Conference in 2026. With that, I would like to now turn us over to really the substance of what we're doing. We're launching the Just Water Partnership principles here today together. But what does that mean? What are they? How did they start? We got a very good overview in history from Professor Mariana Mazzucato. But now I want to transition it over to the team that's been building this conversation for the past year. So with that, I am pleased to introduce Chiara Colombo from the International Water Management Institute, our WaterAid's partner in taking this forward. Chiara, please come join us.
So good morning, everyone. And Leslie, thank you very much for letting me speak after Professor Mazzucato and His Excellency. What a huge task. But I will do my best. So I think that we also, how do I change this slide? Okay. Must be okay. So I think that we did an overview of what the Just Water partnerships are. And as Professor Mazzucato said, these reciprocal, mutualistic, and symbiotic relationships, as we may call them. And I will go a little bit through the process and also what they are important. So this is more or less the timeline. As you can see, the process started with the launch of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water that was co-chaired by Professor Mazzucato, Johan Rockström with other commissioners. And there was this call to have a new approach that was justice-centered to investment decisions. And also it's truly the how and how we do it and how we make sure that this is truly inclusive and equitable. The timeline that reflects also a sequence and structured development process. At World Water Council, there were, last year, there were discussions of how to start the work. And the main recommendation was to start from principles. And so this is why the global consultations were focusing on these major principles and what it means. What are the shared principles? What's the common ground that could then be the layers that where we would build the Just Water partnerships. Now we are at COP30, so we are launching the principles. And then next year we will have 2026 is a huge year for water events, and we expect to have also countries stepping up next year by COP38. And we're also happy that the Honourable Minister said he wants to develop a clear roadmap of just water principles. So that's a huge development and a great advancement of the just water partnerships. I think that also one of the main words together with just is also the value, so why stakeholders should adopt this approach. It does, the system and the approach does deliver strategic value to a broad range of actors. For governments, it creates a coherent structure that helps align ministers, regulators, utilities, and subnational authorities, and create this sort of cross-sectorial and across the levels of governance, which is very important if we have a mission and a delivery, an outcome approach. For development banks and donors, it reduces duplication and provides clarity on national priorities, increasing the efficiency and predictability of investment. And for civil society and communities, the approach provides structured opportunities for participation and accountability. Also adding that by embedding justice across principle, it offers stakeholders a shared framework for improving decision-making and enabling more equitable and long-term outcomes. And is also more important if we want to have an outcome-driven approach. So, again, this is on the launch, so the call for the Just Water Partnerships that was included in the Global Commission of the Economics of Water. So a platform for water investment that has justice and equity at the core of the decision making. The approach aims at increased bankability by consolidating investments around coherent national plans and reduce fragmentation, which is often seen as one of the major barriers to effectiveness. And I also want to understand that the country ownership is very important. So this is also why having countries stepping up is major for the success of the partnership, of the Just Water Partnerships. The model also emphasizes supporting regulatory environments, integrating climate action. This is also why we're here at COP30 launching these principles, and applying new scientific insights, including the management of both green and blue and green water flows and cycle, which was also one of the main recommendations from the report. And this is also why WaterAid and IMI are working together to cover the whole water cycle in this approach and in this initiative. It also needs for coherent cross-sectorial policy, and also here how water is embedded and is linking across all the international global agendas, biodiversity, climate, desertification as well. We often overlook that, but desertification as well. So that's also something that we're looking closely at. It does, at the core, it promotes a shift toward long-term sustainability and an outcomes-based approach. All these elements are underpinned by justice-based principles that ensure that investment and policy choices work to reduce inequalities and support sustainable water management. So why start with principles? I briefly said that earlier. It was a main recommendation from the consultations that were held last year at Stockholm Water Week. It was sort of a suggestion and recommendation for preventing fragmentation and exclusion in development of country platforms. It also, so another word that I think is one of the crucial words within this initiative is the word trust. So we need to build trust across stakeholders, and we need to start from a common ground so that also everything is clear and in agreement, so that we create something that is long-term and creates long-term impact. and also enables for a system-wide change rather than isolated interventions. So moving from a project-based scenario to more of a mission-driven, program-driven, portfolio-driven scenario, as Professor Mazzucato was saying earlier. So beyond the principle words, because the principles are not intended for high-level endorsement and law, but are truly operational. So in a way, as IMI and International Water Management and WaterAid as facilitators of this process, we aim to have these principles to guide decision making, action, and accountability. They are designed as tools for government that partners also can do to establish new just water partnerships, to apply to what's already existent through a just water partnerships lens, and validate claims for aligning with of alignment with just water partnerships standards. Also, the principles help anchor just water partnerships in concrete implementation pathways and ensures that justice, so this is like justice remains central to all investment decisions. So I think that this gives you sort of an overview. I think now Mariana will go through the consultations that then took us to which are the principles for just water partnership. But I would also leave by saying that I think the key words are just, value, and trust, so that we truly can build from like a foundation that is strong and that brings like long-term impacts on the ground. So I'll give it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara. Moving along, so now we've talked a lot about these principles, right? Now, do you want to know what they are? I guess you do. And I invite Mariana Diaz-Simpson, working for WaterAid, who has really been working with me to drive this process alongside IMI over the past more than 6 months, but not that much. So Mariana.
Thank you, Leslie, and hello, everyone. Let me take these off. So, and I'm going to put this back on because it's quite noisy around here. So I just wanted to share a little bit of the consultation process that we undertook before we got today to the launch of this principles today. So we kicked off this public process in July, and we carried it on until October 2025. And as it's been said earlier, it's been a process facilitated by WaterAid and IMI, and it was a two-phase global consultation, very focused on developing the principles of just water partnerships. So we conducted outreach to nearly 500 institutions, 2/3 of them coming from the Global South. And to support this process, we conducted task research. We developed a framing note with initial drafts to spark discussions of what these principles could look like. We created a dedicated web page for it as well to guide these consultations, and held webinars in multiple languages. And the consultation methods included in-person discussions, for example, during Finance for Development conference in Seville, Stockholm World Water Week. We had 2 online surveys, and we also had in-country consultations taking place in countries such as Ghana, that we heard earlier, Madagascar, and Nepal. So just a brief snapshot of the kind of feedback that we received and where this feedback came from, because that matters. We had a majority response coming from the African continent. Asian Pacific came next. The level of interventions of the organizations that were involved in this also matter. We had the greatest representation coming from the local and subnational level, as well as the national level, and you'll see that it matters, and it did make a difference on the principles that we arrived at. The stakeholder group that also got involved in this went from national level, but you will also see here that they sparked great interest from civil society and national level NGOs. And of course, that also has an impact and a matter on the principles that we are launching today. And we received 108 institutional responses from 44 countries. as you obviously the majority from the Global South. I just wanted to, of course, we received all kinds of feedback, different organizations, bullying, making sure that the issues that matter for them the most were prioritized, but some of this cross feedback that we received was the importance of integrating sanitation into these principles. When we talk about just water partnerships, of course, we had a lot of organizations and governments, different stakeholders jumping to say, what about sanitation? Let's not forget sanitation. The importance of making sure that climate resilience was present across all principles. The importance of balancing government leadership, so there's an acknowledgement and understanding that there should be a country-led, government-led process, but that this could also be, co-owned with clear responsibilities, making sure there is inclusive participation. There was a push to strengthen the role of subnational governments. As we know, in many countries, the context of delivering water sanitation and also leading water resource management happens at the subnational level. And the need, a push to strengthen, mentions and prioritizing transparency, integrity, and the adoption of accountability mechanisms. Also asking, who's holding whom to account and how. There were many questions about the how on this process. There were also strong recommendations of the inclusion of transboundary and water for peace aspects, as well as the need, as we move forward, to continue to work on this, to define very clearly measurable targets, including for equity and inclusion. What do we mean by equity and inclusion when we talk about just water partnerships? So outcomes. We are launching now. Our colleagues are going to distribute the publication of the principles now. And we were very focused here on defining just what's meant by just when we talk about just water partnerships, and also the 5 guiding principles to support the establishment of just water partnerships at the national level. So the 5 guiding principles we arrived at after this global, very diverse consultation focus on 5 aspects. Number 1 being social equity and inclusion. And what that means is questions such as, have groups facing exclusion being identified to become part, to be involved in just water partnerships? As Professor Mariana Mazzucato said earlier, it's very important not just the what, but the how. How you arrive, how you achieve these objectives. Have targeted measures being built into financing, governance, and delivery to ensure more actable and investment outcomes. Another question for what could be a checklist when governments are and their partners at the national level are establishing just water partnerships, focus on government leadership. Is the government advancing justice-oriented priorities through transparent, accountable processes and inclusive multi-stakeholder participation? Is the government ensuring investments are evaluated for equitable distribution of projects and benefits instead of carrying on with business as usual? So a third aspect, the third principle, is focusing on inclusive governance. Are accessible platforms and mechanisms in place to ensure that diverse stakeholders, including marginalized groups, are able to influence decisions and hold duty bearers to account? So again, it's the question of the how. How are these principles implemented and brought to action? A fourth principle focuses on sustainable development, sustainable finance. The financing arrangements ensure affordability and transparency for all, protect human rights, and avoid debt and subsidy structures that undermine sustainability and equity in the long term. And fifth, on climate integration, are climate risks and adaptation measures systematically embedded in water resources management and wash plans, investments, governance frameworks to protect vulnerable communities and ecosystems, and are they clearly aligned with and supportive of national adaptation plans and nationally determined contributions. So I'm not going to read through all of the definitions and principles because you're receiving the publication, as I mentioned earlier, if you can distribute that. But you will see that both the definition of just and the principles are what could be considered aspirational or ambition, but this was intentional. And as I've been hearing, I've been here following all the civil society movements and the grassroots mobilization happening outside of the Blue Zone. I'm Brazilian. I was very happy to be able to follow that. And what we're hearing is there is no just transition without people, and there is no climate justice without social justice. So that's why it's so important that these principles are aspirational and ambitious. We shouldn't just be aiming for the low-hanging fruits, but need to be upholding human rights to water sanitation as it's defined in the principles. So in this context of just water partnerships, just means upholding the human rights to water sanitation, treating water as a common good, and ensuring fair and inclusive access to services and finance. So encompassing both processes and outcomes, promoting accountable and participatory governance, actable and climate resilience delivery, and political will to address inequalities and safeguard the rights and needs of vulnerable and marginalized groups across generations and borders. So that's the definition that with everyone's contribution we arrived at. And you will see the principles. Number 1, focus there on equity, inclusion, and water justice. National leadership with shared ownership. Inclusive and accountable governance. Finance anchored in public value and sustainability, very aligned with what Professor Mazzucato shared earlier. And climate and development integration. So from that, I'll give you back to Leslie so we can have our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mariana. I hope that her summary of what has really been a large body of work that really kicked into gear starting in May, but has been building and slowly, coming forward since before then. And we thank you, right? We thank you who are here in the room. We thank those of you who are participating in the live stream, because this isn't just about us. Again, this is what we have facilitated a process. This is what you all have contributed and built, and we will continue to build and evolve this together. So thank you. And we should all be celebrating and moving forward. So with that, I do get to invite a number of people up onto the stage where we're going to really look at what do we do from here. Now that we have the principles, right? Now that we have the core values that really can set us on an equal footing and our vision, how are we going to get there, right? We heard earlier from the State Minister of Climate Change and Sustainability from Ghana, but there's a lot more that can be done, and it's going to look different in Ghana than it will in Bangladesh, in any other country that we want to actually build this. So with that, I have the pleasure of inviting several people to the stage. I'll start. Mathilde, you're right here. Mathilde Mesnard, who's Deputy Director for the Environment Directorate of the OECD. Thank you. Luca Rizzo, Senior Climate Finance Lead from I'll say it in English, the Climate and Society Institute here in Brazil, that has done a lot of really interesting work on climate country platforms. And when we talk about water and climate, we want to be integrated. I have also Patricia Valeria Vaz Arial. She is manager for the legal framework on sanitation from the Ministry of Cities for the government of Brazil. Daniela Bacas. There. Welcome. Mariana Mazzucato referenced the Development Bank of Brazil earlier, and we actually have the head of sustainability for BNDES here with us to talk through this. And you're still stuck with me. So with that, give me one moment to pull up my notes. But the first person I know that I am speaking to is Mathilde. And I want to, and as a reminder, or for many of you who may be less familiar, the OECD was when the Global Commission for the Economics of Water, was kicked off in 2023. The OECD was their secretariat. Of late, that has transitioned away from the OECD over to EME, but the OECD remains incredibly supportive and a true champion of all of the calls to action that have come forward from the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. And it's been an active participant in following this process to develop the principles of JWPs quite closely. So the question for you is, in what ways does financing shape outcomes in water, justice, and equity, and what financial approaches can help in addressing these existing biases?
Thank you, Leslie. And first, let me congratulate you and all the institutions involved for these principles. They are absolutely critical, I think, in the way forward to shape the partnership. So kudos for that. So now let me answer your questions about the financing mechanisms. What we have seen in our different experience at the OECD is that you have a lot of financing mechanisms that do exacerbate the inequalities related to water access and also unfair exposures to water vulnerability. The prevailing financing models, very clearly, they favor the big, large infrastructure investments, such as wastewater treatment facilities, desalination plants, or big reservoirs, etc. And usually the rural sanitation and the decentralized solutions are underserved by these classical financing mechanisms. What we see also that in terms of official development assistance, water-related ODA, it's sometimes, but often, I would say, it fails to serve the countries that are most in need. Then if you look at the financial innovation, that somehow is numerous in terms of the water-related investments, with multiple arrangements, new arrangements to blend public and private finance. Also, they often fail to be deployed in low-income countries. And last but not least, the public subsidies that are often mis-targeted, so they do not benefit those most in need at the country level or the regional level or the city level. So these there are kind of inherent biases in financing mechanisms and investments, but they can be addressed in several ways. And the key question is how to ensure that water justice and equity goals actually shape the investment decisions beyond just financial sustainability. And I think the Just Water partnerships, they can help, bridging those gaps. So let me give you three important considerations to shape these arrangements, financing mechanisms. First, you need to design the financing and the funding models from the outset to prioritize equity, building on the evidence that water, equity, and justice are not just economically marginal, but they are actually critical for the long-term viability of those investments, and also for delivering reliable services and for fostering a long-term development. So the Just Water partnerships should also integrate these social equity metrics into investments planning and coordination from the outset, from the start. It's not an afterthought. Oh my God, I've shaped my investment mechanisms and I forgot to think about equity. No, from the outset, it should shape them. Second point, it's very important also to incentivize the delivery of results in line with population needs and justice outcomes. And this should be measured not only in financial terms, obviously, but also based on other dimensions of performance, including social and environmental indicators. This can be achieved notably by the water implementation of result-based financing mechanisms, and also by setting up conditionalities in financing instruments and contracts. And these contracts and instruments should be structured and managed to ensure alignment with long-term policy objectives. So it's like alignment with long-term, integrating equity from the outset. And the third point I would like to make is that you need to also have to develop and implement balanced risk-sharing frameworks. Those that move beyond traditional de-risking approaches, that those that ensure equitable distributions of risk and returns between the capital providers and the recipients, and also between the public and the private stakeholders, as Mariana mentioned, notably in the framework of public-private partnership models for water investments. So we are working on these issues at the OECD, and we are making some concrete policy recommendations. And we will have very soon a report on this that is called Strengthening the Sustainability of Water Investments, Alternative Financing Approaches and Models. So I will stop here. Thanks.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. Really excellent, and I absolutely, as you know, 100% agree with everything that you were saying, and that's what we hope to do, is really design with intent from the beginning. So with that, I would like to move over to Patricia. The Ministry of Cities of Brazil has recently is under conversation to collaborate with Just Water Partnerships for, in the context of COP, for a plan to accelerate solutions for resilient water resource management, supply and sanitation systems, and increase cities' resilience to extreme events such as prolonged droughts and increasingly frequent floods. We still have a lot of details to really work through, but sitting here with us, how do you think Brazil can set an example for other countries when it comes to integrating the principles of Just Water Partnership into existing structures?
Okay, hi, morning everyone. First of all, I would like to say I'm very glad to be here representing Minister of Cities of Brazil. And I would like to apologize that I'm not comfortable to speak in English, so I asked Mariana help me with translation. Então, para a gente é uma honra muito grande estar aqui, participando com os parceiros aqui na construção desse plano de aceleração de soluções para a implementação de sistemas de abastecimento de água e esgotamento sanitário resilientes, que em princípio era uma iniciativa pequena, voltada para o contexto da América do Sul, mas que diante das conversas a gente está conseguindo ampliar para um contexto mais global.
Okay, so she's thanking, saying it's an honor to be here, and that she's representing the Ministry of Cities, and the solution that was initially proposed, that was very focused on the national level, and that they have since expanded it to exchange with different countries based on the solutions developed in Brazil.
Okay. No Brasil, a gente tem uma estrutura institucional um pouco robusta, que eu acho que já está bem alinhada aos princípios. A gente tem um marco legal instituído desde 2007, que define o saneamento básico como os 4 componentes: abastecimento de...
One second.
Okay.
So she's saying that in Brazil they have a legal framework for the delivery of water sanitation, and focused actually on sanitation. And that is grounded in a law approved in 2007. And it defines 4 components that are very aligned with the principles of Just Water Partnership.
Esse marco legal ele foi atualizado em 2020, incorporando a necessidade de se cumprir com metas de universalização até 2033 e trazendo princípios para que essas metas sejam alcançadas.
So this legal framework was updated in 2020, bringing more ambitious goals, including the target to universalized access to sanitation by 2033, and also introducing new principles and guidelines to expand access to sanitation for all.
Na questão da governança, até a nível federal, a gente tem uma governança instituída por meio de um Comitê Interministerial de Saneamento Básico, composto por 9 ministérios que atuam de alguma forma no saneamento, nos recursos hídricos ou no financiamento.
At the national level, they do have governance structures. For instance, the Inter-Ministerial Commission, containing 9 different ministries.
Que atuam no saneamento, na gestão de recursos hídricos ou mesmo no financiamento.
Working on sanitation, water resource management, and also in financing.
Okay. A questão da regulação também é uma questão muito forte que veio na atualização do marco legal, trazendo responsabilidade para se editar normas de referência e trazer assim maior segurança jurídica para a iniciativa privada também investir no setor.
Another important aspect of this updated legal framework is regulation, with establishing clear responsibilities for different actors, including more judicial security for investments from the private sector.
E a questão dos investimentos, né? Então, assim, o governo federal atua investindo com recursos públicos, a gente tem uma carteira muito grande de empreendimentos e investimentos, e a partir da atualização do marco legal, a gente teve uma atração de investimentos privados muito grande também.
And also in investments, the government already has a domestic budget mobilized for the sector, and with the new updated framework law, they were also able to attract a lot of new private investment.
Então, o plano de aceleração de soluções, que de princípio estávamos liderando, agora a gente vai para uma parceria, ele tinha um exemplo concreto assim dessa questão da incorporação dos princípios também. Eles estão voltados para a implementação de infraestrutura, de abastecimento de água, esgoto.
So the solution acceleration plan they're presenting, and now that they're working in partnership with us with Just Water Partnerships, pode voltar,
apoiando projetos de redução de perdas de água, diversificação de fontes hídricas.
Wants to support the reduction of water waste.
Diversificação de fontes hídricas, reuso, drenagem sustentável e ampliação da governança local.
Reuse, diversification of water resources and stronger local governance.
Okay. No dia 12, fizemos até um evento para explicar um pouco esse plano. O evento foi chamado Reposicionar o Brasil como líder global na gestão de água. E a gente trouxe experiências do Reino dos Países Baixos, o Water Positive Think Tank, a Agência Nacional de Águas. E a gente discutiu bastante isso, como melhorar a governança hídrica, a infraestrutura resiliente e a cooperação internacional. Então, está bem alinhado com os princípios.
So she also wanted to highlight an event that they hosted here at COP on the 12th of November called Repositioning Brazil as a Global Leader in Responsible Water Management and Urban Water Planning, that brought together several countries, including the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Brazilian National Water Agency, and share different experiences, and also discussed innovative solutions in water governance, resilient infrastructure, and international cooperation, and all themes that are very well aligned with Just Water Partnerships.
Entrando um pouquinho mais no princípio do financiamento, a gente tem uma estimativa que são necessários cerca de 167 bilhões para a universalização do saneamento no Brasil.
They coming into finance, focusing on finance and investments. The forecast they have is that they need 160 billion Brazilian reais for investments in the sanitation sector.
Mas estamos com uma experiência muito positiva com os leilões e as concessões que vêm acontecendo. Já houveram 600 concessões que alavancaram cerca de 44 bilhões de dólares até o momento.
But they've been having a positive experience in attracting new sources of finance, including through auctioning, bidding, and concessions that have attracted 44 billion dollars into the sector. And over 600 concession or bidding have taken place.
Temos outros 29 projetos em estruturação, estimados aí também com outros mais 10 bilhões de dólares.
They also have 29 projects under development right now, and they're expected to raise another $10 billion.
Então hoje a gente já tem uma estrutura híbrida entre o público e o privado.
So now they have a blended structure between public and private,
que é um modelo de complementariedade e cooperação.
That complements each other, and it's also focused on cooperation.
Acho que isso demonstra, assim, na prática, que a cooperação internacional ela não visa substituir as políticas, mas sim subsidiar e fortalecê-las.
So this shows that international cooperation doesn't aim to replace public policy, but to strengthen them.
Acho que é
Thank you.
Thank you for that. It is really, it is about, yeah, the strengthening the systems on the ground. Thank you so much. So with that, I want to turn over to you, Luca. I mentioned this briefly. Sorry, I want to organize my notes better. Yay. Okay. All right. We know that this is at its core, this is a coordination platform. And we know that coordination platforms are not new, that they absolutely exist, and that therefore in designing Just Water partnerships, we have a lot to learn from what is already out there and also seek opportunities for collaboration and integration. So one of the things we really wanted to talk about was the country platforms that are so prevalent now in the climate conversation about how to direct and access climate finance. And in fact, we also know, seated here in Brazil, that Brazil's country platform, the Brazil Climate and Ecological Transformation Investment Platform, aka BIP, or BIP, is celebrated as one of the best examples of country platforms currently today. So especially in light of what we've just heard and the conversation we're having with the Ministry of Cities of Brazil, what do you think we can learn from the Brazil experience as we think of building Just Water partnerships? Another way of thinking about that as well is, now that we have these core principles established, is there a way to integrate them into well-established country platforms such as the BIP?
Thank you, Leslie. First and foremost, congratulations for the principles. We have been talking about that since FFT. It was a pleasure also to join the consultation and to provide some inputs. I'm happy to be here in the second week of COP, this marathon, right? And I will talk about country platforms. And for those who are not from the climate finance community, it's worth explaining what is country platforms. Country platforms are voluntary mechanisms established by governments to foster the collaboration between development partners according to country priorities. This is not a new concept. It's a concept that was first described and officially launched in principles in the G20 in 2018. We had some experience, some first experience, such as in South Africa with the JETBs. But last year with the G20 in Brazil, we had a new moment for country platforms, because in the Task Force for Climate Against Climate Change, the TF Clima, Brazil brought together diplomats, Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Finance to discuss climate finance and climate priorities. And one of these, the outcomes of these discussions was a study that we supported on country platforms, on features of new country platforms, on the new generation of country platforms. And it was very positive because countries, the G20 countries, agreed that country platforms should be fostered to implement the new round of NDCs. Can you hear me well? Okay. And by the same time that Brazil put the country platforms again in the international agenda discussions, Brazil, in the end of October of last year, the end of last year, in the sidelines of the annual meetings in DC, launched its own country platforms, the Brazilian Investment Platform, or BIP. So it was a positive sign from Brazil, because Brazil was recommending countries to develop platforms, and Brazil launched its platform. The platform, the Brazilian platform, is intended to streamline different sources of finance, covering from multilateral development banks, vertical climate funds, capital markets, financial institutions, to the priorities that Brazil is establishing as the most important projects to Brazil meet with its NDC goals. The platform is hosted by BNDES as the secretariat, and here we have Daniela Bacas representing BNDES. And it's related to 8 sectors, ranging from nature-based solutions, regenerative agriculture, and industry, also composing some hard-to-abate sectors that for us is important, such as cement and steel. So the platform has a pipeline already of around $23 billion of potential investments, and BNDES is matchmaking these potential projects that are demanding demanding investments through the development partners community. We already have some transactions disbursed, but the lessons learned that I can say here that was very interesting to see in this almost more than 1 year now is the governance side, because the platform has a steering committee composed of different ministries. The Ministry of Finance is leading, but for the first time we have ministries of industry, environment, energy, and finance in a table, in a room, discussing climate priorities. So this is very positive because we are streamlining our priorities and also sending a coordinated message to the development community on what we should prioritize. And something that it's worth mentioning as well, so basically we are moving ahead with our platform in Brazil, but Brazil also has continued the international leadership on country platforms, because, as I mentioned, this is it's a very important instrument for the new round of NDCs. And yesterday, and this is very new, we were, not yesterday, yesterday was Sunday. On Saturday, I'm crazy with this marathon. Yes, on Saturday, Brazil has convened a big roundtable with GCF, the Green Climate Fund, in which 13 countries has announced that will develop country platforms, plus one regional platform that will be led by the Commissioner of African countries. So all of these countries intend to develop new platforms, which is a very positive sign. And for the initiative that we're discussing here, the water partnerships, this is totally aligned with the platforms, because this is already embedded in the platforms. In Brazil, we don't have water as a priority, but we have nature-based solutions. We have regenerative agriculture that is highly dependent on water, and it also provides outcomes of water, because if we don't have forests, we don't have the flying rivers. We don't have the water, the sufficient water that will feed São Paulo, which is the biggest city in Brazil. So that's why we already have some sectors that are highly dependent on water, or they produce water outcomes. So my suggestion here is that for the new round of platforms that is emerging from this COP, this 13 plus the regional one, we can work with the countries to consider the principles of water partnership, so that they can consider as a priority some priority sectors or some priority outcomes, some results related to water. And it's very interesting to conclude in the discussions that we had on Saturday with the countries, they are considering the ownership as one of the most important matters. So you have different mechanisms. So in Brazil we have the BIP and the BNDES, but there are some countries that are establishing a special purpose vehicle, SPV, in which the dividends will feed a sovereign wealth fund that will finance social projects. So that could be also a potential opportunity for the water projects. And there are several countries that are, yes, they are looking to energy efficiency, but also other countries are looking to nature-based solutions and regenerative agriculture in Brazil. So I see a good momentum to establish these discussions and to try to link the discussions that we have now with the principles, with the country platform agenda. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. That's great, and I love everything that you just said, and I think that this is a great opportunity. And again, one reason why we actually make sure we have a Water for Climate Pavilion, where we actually really intentionally bring forward these conversations about actually coordinating and working together for shared goals. So thrilled, and thank you, and we continue talking. So with that, and the final perspective on this panel, although certainly there's a lot more conversation to be had, is from Daniela Bacchus of the Brazilian National Economic and Social Development Bank, BNDES. This bank is one of the largest development banks in the world and has played a fundamental role in stimulating the expansion of industry and infrastructure across the country. At the moment, what we'd like to know is, how does BNDES incorporate justice and social equity into its investments? And what might be the technical challenges you would experience if you were to take these Just Water Partnerships principles and integrate them into your water investments?
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Mariana, for the invitation. Thank you for our distinguished panelists here. It's an honor to be here. I would like to answer the question providing some examples of what I've been doing. Of course, Patricia and Luca mentioned before BNDES, so there's a lot to talk, so I would like to focus on some programs and plans that we are undertaking there to stimulate the more related projects on adaptation and water. But just to answer the justice part and social part aspects of the infrastructure in general, financing of the bank, we do have a corporate social and environment and climate policy, and this is very strategic for the bank, decarbonization, adaptation, and so forth. And we also, to guide this policy and to concretize, to put this in the floor, I would say, we have an action plan also that incorporates the year 2025 to 2027, 3 years. And we have 4 axes. In one axis, the first one is how we could achieve and contribute to achieve Brazil's NDCs, and also in alignment with all the public policies such as the ecological transformation plan and all the new industrialization of Brazil and the acceleration growth plan. So this is how we do what we do with our different business models, even with grants or capital markets or financing or articulating or structuring projects. All these our business models directed to these goals. And we have also a second axis that's more related to risks. And so we have for infrastructure, big projects methodology inspired by the IFC standards on how to connect and understand social and environment, climate risks, and incorporate also transition and physical risks. Nowadays we are talking about infrastructure, so that's very important. And we aim through this plan to improve little by little this methodology and understand how to go forward with that. And also we have a third axis, that capacity building, how we can collaborate internally to understand, to support more strategic projects on that. And a fourth axis is more related to transparency. I feel that's a big issue from our perspective, the principles. So how we measure our impact, how we provide transparency, panels, dashboards, and so forth, and receive feedback from the society, from everyone about this. But to do more specifically, to talk about our transformation plan or our first axis and how we built the adaptation and water projects, I would like to mention 3 perspectives. The first one is the climate fund. Brazil has the largest climate fund in the South region. This was the climate fund is led by the environmental ministry in Brazil, but the BNDES is the operator agent of this fund, and it was created in COP15 in 2009. But it had few budget connected to that because it derived from it's very innovative because it derived from the oil royalties to supply the fund. But in 2023, the Brazilian Treasury decided to issue sovereign sustainable bonds to refill the fund. And so we had an escalating budget for that. So in 2024 and 2025, we had about 10 billion reais, about $2 billion to induce and to stimulate new climate projects, either mitigation or adaptation project. And in terms of adaptation, it turns out that BNDES as a catalyst, as an agent of development, and could articulate with public sector, with policies, with ministries, and with private sector. We are engaging in stimulating new projects from the public sector for this fund. So we had a profile, a portfolio now that more than 6 billion reais in adaptation for states and municipalities, and more than 1 billion derived from this climate fund. And we can finance, for example, urban planning, eliminating dumps, because we do have dumps in Brazil, dumps with generation of energy from biomass and biomethane. So there are possible micro drainage and rain gardens, all nature-based solutions. So we are stimulating those projects with municipalities with this fund. It's a concessional fund, so it's very worth to engage public sector on that. And I would like also to mention the structuring part of BNDES, because sometimes we don't have bankable projects. We have to coordinate and study and formulate the project together with public sector, or structure the concessions. So BNDES has been providing this service as well by studying these projects and trying to formulate them. And for example, with Pará State here, we have a very good legacy that we had structured projects or concession projects to water supply that will benefit more than 5 million people, and to be a legacy for the copy. And but we managed to put forward a specific program dedicated to stimulate the public agents, municipalities and states, that's called Resilient Cities. So through this program, we provide first the study, the formulating of the study of the needs on adaptation of the city, and then we can provide the finance part of this, so it can be bankable, and so we are stimulating this kind of programs. And another important program that we engage in, and this is more an example of cooperation and integrating fundings. We have a program in Brazil called Sertão Vivo that's dedicated for the semi-arid part of Brazil. It's the least developed part in northeast region of Brazil. It's a kind of, we call Caatinga, that we don't have a vegetation that's called forest, but it's a vegetation more arid. And we have a coordinating agenda with GCF, so the Green Climate Fund coordinated funds, non-reimbursable and reimbursable funds, with GCF and IFAD from the FAO. It's another from the agriculture part of FAO. And together we have more 6 projects for states in the northeast part of Brazil to benefit agriculture family, to restore the vegetation that's important to hydrological purpose, and we're talking about water, and also provide benefits from food security. That's very important for them, and so you can reduce poverty as well. So it's a kind of another example of integrating funds and articulating, and so I would stop here with these 3 examples. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. So I wanted to have more time to ask more questions to the panel, but we're really close to time, and we do have a closing speaker. So I guess I just have to stop here for now, for this moment, but the conversation doesn't end here. And I think we're really sort of bringing forth so many different components, but this is what we need to do to come together in a Just Water partnership. We need these different examples of what's worked and examples of how implementation can happen. And I know that we will be talking a lot in particular with OECD about how to really build and learn from everything that is here and everything that is also out here, so we can actually structure something that will genuinely work and over the coming year, and have some real strong ideas. So thank you so much to all four of you. With that, I do want to invite our closing speaker up, and appreciate anyone who is able to. I know we're pretty much at time, but and of course I just sorry, of course. Well, Saïda bin Saïda Matakazi is the Deputy Executive Director of Climat Madagascar and WaterAid Youth Champion. It's also a pleasure because when we talked about, if you heard, that there were multiple countries that conducted their own country consultations, we know we had the minister from Ghana here, but Madagascar was one of the other countries that has dug in at a deeper level to explore Just Water partnerships. And we thank you for sharing your perspectives and also your experience.
Thank you, Leslie, for giving me the floor. I'm going to be short. Water connects us, sustains us, yet to heaven. It fails to reach everyone equally, unfortunately. From Madagascar, and from my perspective, there are communities whose survival, health, and livelihoods would depend entirely on reliable access to clean water. Climate risks are intensifying. Some regions face severe droughts, while others experience devastating floods. Without proper coordination, investments remain fragmented, and vulnerable communities risk being left behind. This is where Just Water partnerships could make a real difference for Madagascar. They are not just a set of principles. They could provide a concrete pathway to ensure water security that is just, inclusive, and sustainable for both people and planet. By establishing mission-based platforms, Just Water partnerships would bring together governments, civil society, the private sector, and local communities to act together transparently and effectively. From our consultations in Madagascar, it's clear that solutions must be locally led. Communities know their needs and priorities best. This is why we are going to integrate Just Water partnerships into 2 national platforms, giving local authorities, knowledge holders, and civil society a genuine voice. This decentralization at local level would strengthen ownership, ensure interventions and contextually relevant, and build trust among all stakeholders. For Just Water partnerships to succeed, from my side, democracy, transparency, and accountability would need to guide every step. Clear rules, open access to information, and mutual responsibility would foster trust and collaboration. In Madagascar, we emphasize participatory governance. We are trying. Women, youth, and marginalized groups are actively included. Financial flows, particularly local resources, from wash management. If these principles are applied, the benefits are tangible. For people, it could mean equitable access to water, increased resilience to climate shocks, and reduced inequalities. For ecosystems, rivers, wetlands, and forests could be better protected, supporting both biodiversity and livelihoods. By combining local knowledge with scientific evidence, Madagascar could design solutions that are adaptable, culturally sensitive, and sustainable, demonstrating that human well-being and environmental health can advance together. Just Water partnerships are a concept worth turning into reality. They offer a way to act urgently and collectively, ensuring that every investment in water contributes not only to immediate needs, but to long-term resilience. Madagascar approach could serve as an example, but it's now at short term. And with Just Water partnerships, we really thought that long-term results will be on the stage. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you with that. And yes, thank you for spending this morning with us. Thank you for being here at this important milestone in the journey. You have copies with you. We have a webpage that is now going live that will have this available for download and more information. We will update it shortly to also share some of the content from today in addition to the principles themselves. But stay tuned. This is the beginning, or not the very beginning, right? But it's the first milestone on the journey, and we want to be a part, when we want you to be a part of this with us as we progress, as we move forward. Thank you so much, and stay tuned.